these days I'm going to bring sunglasses. Is that it? See you. Thank you. I think it is off. Or on.
It's muted up here, though.
Welcome to the National Archives Know Your Records program. My name is Andrea Bassing-Matney. We are broadcasting live today from the National Archives building in Washington, D.C., although today our presenter, Jean Nudd, is calling in from her home in New Hampshire. Before we begin our broadcast today, I have a few tips I'd like to share with you. For those of you on site, I'm hoping that you have picked up our handout. And we ask that you hold your questions until the very end of the program. And when you have those questions, please use the microphones in the aisles. For those of you watching on site, for those of you watching on YouTube, you can also access those same handouts from this web page. There's a hyperlink there. It says handouts. You will also find the presentation slides. And there's a link to the live captioning. So from New Hampshire, we are pleased to have archivist Jean Nudd offer her presentation entitled Using Pre-1850 Census Defined Family Relationships. Jean Nudd is an archivist with the National Archives at College Park, Maryland in research services. However, she works from home in New Hampshire. She is an avid genealogist and lectures frequently on using federal records and doing genealogy. She has given presentations to the Federation of Genealogical Societies in Boston, New England Regional Genealogical Conferences, Ohio Genealogical Society's annual conference, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speaker, Jean Nudd.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and welcome everyone today. We're going to talk about using our ancestors' relatives to find out about our ancestors. This is called using collateral, lines, and it can help you identify all those numbers in the 1790 to 1840 census and give them names. So the first place we start with this on our methodology on slide 3 is to check the 1850, 60, 70 censuses to see if we can find people who may be related to our ancestors. So we're going to look for families with the same surname in the same location or the same region as our ancestors. What we want to do when we're doing this is also look for older people in the household, because frequently during that time period, a lot of people, especially older people, would live in the same household with their children. Then we're going to look at genealogies, town histories, church records, newspapers, whatever we can find to help confirm those possible siblings that we found, and the possible families, because on slide 4, next slide, we're going to also look for the parents, as I said. We're going to check every family, match ages, check previous and future years to find the family. And on slide 5, then we're going to confirm this with other sources. So especially FamilySearch.org is a great place to look, U.S. GenWeb, local historical societies, etc. Now, I like this presentation a lot because it's really based on my own research into my family. And I started out researching my father's side of the family, and he's old-time New England. No one came after 1700 in his family. And so I had a lot of fun, and I would go from Pittsfield, Massachusetts, up to central New Hampshire, where my mother was living at the time. It was about a 4-hour drive, about every 2 or 3 weeks, and I'd regale her with all these stories of the wondrous things I'd found out about my father. My mother was an only child, and so she was slightly egocentric, not to say that all only children are, but she was. And she took this for about 2 or 3 visits before she really got upset with me and said, "I'm still alive, Jean. Why aren't you researching my family?" And I said, "Mother, tell me. I will be happy to research your family." And she got very happy, and she said, "I remember my grandmother, Sophia, not Sophia, Jean, Sophia Goodman Park, and I sat on her lap as a child, and she would tell me stories about the wagon train from Ohio to Iowa. And her father's name was Isaac Goodman, and he was a Polish Jew." So I went back to work, all excited to work on my mother's side of the family. And I looked for Isaac Goodman. Oh, I'd come in early. I'd work over my lunch break. I'd stay after work and look for Isaac Goodman. And I did this for 3 weeks. And there wasn't any Isaac Goodman anywhere in the United States, never mind in Ohio or Iowa, where he was supposed to be. So I drove back up to New Hampshire to see my mother, and fuming the whole way, and I got in the house, and I said to her, "Mother, Isaac Goodman never existed." And I swear to you, with a straight face, she looked at me and she said, "Of course not, Jean. That wasn't his real name." Now, granted, she should have told me that to begin with. But I very calmly said to her, "Okay, Mother, what was his real name?" To which she responded, "I don't know, Jean. I was a child. They didn't talk about such things in front of me. Ask Dorothy. Dorothy will know." Well, Dorothy is the only cousin my mother ever kept in touch with, and I immediately went to the phone and called Dorothy, who was in her 90s at that point. And luckily for my mother, Dorothy was home. I told Dorothy what my mother had said: Isaac Goodman, Polish Jew, immigrant ancestor. And when she stopped laughing, and that did not help my mood any, she said, "Well, first of all, Jean, that's very typical of your mother. His name wasn't Isaac, it was Israel. And he wasn't the immigrant. His father, Solomon, she knew him as Solomon Goodman, was the immigrant. And he wasn't Polish, he was German. And he wasn't Jewish, he was Lutheran. But other than that, your mother had it all right." Slide 6 shows us a photograph of Israel Goodman. And slide 7 shows my mother's genealogy, and you will see in the bottom right hand Israel Goodman, and her my mother's grandmother, Rosanna Sophia, not Sophia, Goodman Park. Slide 8, when I finally went back to work, after that discussion with my mother and Dorothy, and learning when we look for an I name, we don't just look for Isaac, we look for any name. I find in Iowa, on the 1860 census, Israel Goodman. He's right there at the top. He's a Mason, and he's born in Pennsylvania. We can also reason from this, if you look closely at it, Israel William, age 6, was born in Ohio, but Elizabeth J., age 3, was born in Iowa. So we know the wagon train from Ohio to Iowa went sometime between 1854 and 1857. Now slide 9, gives us useful sites to where to look for cousins. Because at this point I said, well, I looked and looked. I couldn't find any more records on Israel Goodman. Let me see if someone else might be looking for an Israel Goodman. So I went on RootsWeb, because at that point we didn't have all of these. I'm talking back in around 1998. We didn't have the full name indexes on Ancestry. We didn't have any of that stuff. So I went to RootsWeb, and they had queries. They still do. And in searching a query, up comes someone looking for Israel Goodman. And slide 10 shows us the email that Val sent me after I responded to hers, and she was so excited to find someone also looking for Israel Goodman. She had him born in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and said, Jean, will you please go down to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and see if you can find anything about him? And I did. And the Israel Goodman, born in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, was born, married, and died there, so he wasn't ours. But you can see she knew all of Israel and Elizabeth's children. She had all their dates of birth and places of birth, so that was very useful. But she didn't have any information that she gave me at that point on his siblings. So slide 11, let's see if this method works. Here's the 1850 census for Delaware, Ohio, for Israel Goodman, Mason, born Pennsylvania. And right next door is Franklin Goodman, also a Mason, also born in Pennsylvania. Sounds pretty good here. If we look further down in Franklin's household, we see Rosanna Goodman, age 64, born in Pennsylvania. Would be mother. So slide 12, I look further in Delaware, Ohio. I find a Levi Goodman, age 35, also a Mason, also born in Pennsylvania, and living in his household with his wife Sarah, daughter Clarissa, is a Jacob Goodman, age 77, born in Germany. Things are looking up. I keep looking in Delaware, and I find, living in a boarding house, a Julia Goodman, age 29, also born in Pennsylvania. So my next step is to take these names, these possible ancestors. There's also in here, there was an Adam. On the censuses, he and Israel were the same age, so I discounted Adam to begin with. So I go to the 1840 census on slide 14, and there's two Jacob Goodmans in Ohio. One is in Delaware, and the other one is in Brunswick. Slide 15 shows you the Delaware County schedule for 1840. And as I say, just a whole bunch of numbers in age brackets. But if we take those numbers and we plot them on a blank form, like I did on slide 16, we see that they line up very well with the children, except we have one extra. We have Julia, but we also have another daughter, unidentified. And the other Jacob from Brunswick, you see I put his numbers down below that, and there's a lot more kids there than I have possibilities. Doesn't rule him out entirely, but makes the first Jacob Goodman look much better as a possible father. Slide 17 is another find from the 1840 census, a Moses Goodman, who may also be a sibling of my Israel. Now I go back in 1830. I don't find any Jacob Goodman in Ohio, so I go back to Pennsylvania. Right? They're all born in Pennsylvania. So when I look on slide 18 for Jacob Goodmans in Pennsylvania in 1830, I come up with 4 possibilities, 1 from Albany, 2 from Reading in the South Ward, and 1 from Londonderry. Slide 19, I've charted those all out with the numbers and ages of the children. The 2 in South Reading fit the best, and on slide 20, I show you the names of the children that I know and how they fit in that relationship. Slide 21, we go back to 1820. Now this is where you can start if you have someone who appears every year in the census, like this Jacob Goodman in Londonderry. He's also there in 1840. So I'm also looked at the Pennsylvania census for 1840 to rule out the people who stayed in Pennsylvania, right? Because we know that they're not our person. And slide 22, I've charted those out for you as well. Slide 23 shows you the 1910. So we just keep going backwards. Slide 24 is charting out all of those people. Can I definitively say which one is mine? No, I can't. Not yet. Slide 25. Now, migration patterns are an interesting thing to study, especially when you're doing something like this. And maps can be very useful. Slide 26 there shows an article that I used on using maps. Slide 27 is a map of Pennsylvania, showing you that Berks County, which is where Reading is, and of course, when I went to Lancaster for Val, I drove through Reading to get to Lancaster, and I drove through Reading to get home. I could have stopped and done research had I known. Slide 28 shows you where Reading is in relation to the rest of the state. Slide 29 is a map of Ohio. Boy, does Ohio have a lot of counties. And Delaware is just about smack dab in the middle of the state. And slide 30 shows you where Delaware Township is in the county of Delaware. Now, another confirmation when you're using collateral research is to look at migration patterns. Often groups of families relocated together. Very rare that an ancestor moved all by themselves. Very frequently, they would move together. So to check out migration patterns and to do cluster research is a useful technology. So what we do is, slide 31, we search the census in the place where our ancestor migrated to, in this case, Delaware, Ohio. And we write down all the surnames. I know it sounds daunting, but now you can just do an all-name search on Ancestry and give it those parameters and print them out. You didn't have to write them down like I did when I did this back 10 years ago. So we're going to write down all the surnames of the people born in the same state. And it's also a good idea to get their first names and their ages. So I start with 1850 Delaware, Ohio, and I then check all the surnames in 1840 against that to see how many of them were there at the same time as Jacob. There were 47 men living in Delaware in 1850 who were born in Pennsylvania, living in Delaware County, in Delaware City. 24 of those, or just about half, were also there in 1840, 19 of which both surname and given name check. But, of course, it could have been bigger because since I didn't write down all the ages, Israel and Levi, there are some hidden ones who may have been there in 1840 but still in their father's household, and so they don't show up. And then again, using an ancestry database, we check the surnames for 1830 index in Pennsylvania. And here, 9 of the surnames appeared in the census in the South Ward of Reading, just like my possible Jacob Goodman, with 4 exact matches of surname and given name. Not good, not proof, but a good confirmation that it's a possibility that my Jacob Goodman was from South Reading. So I did go back and visit the Berks County Historical Society, slide 32, and I visited the website first, and there's a lot of stuff on U.S. Gen Web for the Berks County Historical Society. And that's a very good place to look if you're doing Pennsylvania research, because most of the counties in Pennsylvania have historical societies. They have a lot of the church records available. And some of them, like Berks County, have put these online. So slide 33 shows us the church records. And the society has an online index to these, the database. And I found 19 Jacob Goodmans, slide 34. And I found 25 John Goodmans. John Franklin's name was actually John Franklin. But I didn't find any Levi's or Julia's or Rosanna's. I found 6 Israels. This is slide 36, so we're going to skip over slide 35. Go right to 36. But unfortunately, none of these match up. And when I actually, don't we all forget to go look at the actual information about databases? When I looked at the information, it turned out that the stuff online for South Reading Ward church records all predated 1800, so they were useless to me anyway. But then I visited the Delaware County Historical Society online on U.S. Gen Web, slide 37, and they have available on their website the database of cemetery records. And that search found, slide 38, a listing in the Oak Grove Cemetery for Jacob Goodman, and slide 39, also one for John Franklin Goodman, or Francis. I don't know where the Francis came from. First time I've seen that. And it says he was born in Kurtztown in Berks County, Pennsylvania. This is one of the proofs that I found. Eventually, I had to go out to Berks County, to Delaware County, Ohio, and I suppose I could have written a letter, but that's not anywhere near as much fun. I went out to the cemetery. Never been to a cemetery doing research before. It was quite an experience for me on a very rainy day, only day I had there to do it, though. And I said, I want the deed that goes with this plot in the Oak Grove Cemetery. And the gentleman said to me, so typical of researching my mother's side, well, we're sorry, but that deed book was destroyed in a flood. However, they did happen to transcribe the deed book into a database before it was destroyed in a flood, and guess who bought that plot? In the cemetery, none other than Israel Goodman, who would not have bought a plot for someone who wasn't his father. So at least now I know for sure that this Jacob Goodman is Israel Goodman's father. So another place to keep looking for that evidence to support the findings that we're getting in this collateral research is Family Search, slide 40. This is not what the website looks like now, so we'll skip to slide 43. I'll give them a minute to skip slides here, which is where we're going to do a place search to find out what they have available for Delaware County, Ohio. We're going to put in under place, we're going to put in Ohio, we're going to put in Delaware, and then under part of, we're going to put in Ohio. And the results come up on 44, and it gives us choices. We can look in the county of Delaware, we can look in the city of Delaware, we can look in Delaware Township. So there's 3, but Delaware Township It's actually in Defiance County. So we have several levels of government here that we can search. Slide 45 shows you the different types of records they have. Slide 46, if you click on newspapers, it gives you a title of what they have for newspapers. Slide 47 gives you a further description of those newspaper abstracts. Slide 48 shows you the church records, the possible church records. Slide 49 shows you again the definition of what those church records actually are. And slide 50 is the county listing. Shows you the type of information you might find for the county. Slide 51, when I did this for Pennsylvania, I looked at Reading, and I found naturalizations. In the 1830 census, one of the neat little things there is in there is there'll be a little slash in a box if the person was an alien. And since we know Jacob Goodman was born in Germany, not in the United States, I looked for that slash to determine which one of those possible Jacob Goodmans might be mine, since either one is a possibility in South Reading. But lo and behold, neither of them had a slash, meaning that my Jacob Goodman was probably a naturalized citizen. So this index to naturalizations in Reading, Pennsylvania was very interesting for me. But when I go to slide 52 and look at the actual listing, we see a George Goodman, we see a Reuben Goodman, no Jacob. Oh, well, so if he naturalized, he didn't do it in Reading. Slide 53, one of the other things that they had, Ancestry has available, is the early marriage records from Delaware County, Ohio. And if you look at slide 54, there we see Adam, Franklin, Israel, Levi, and lo and behold, that other daughter, Mary C., who married in 1849, and therefore she's not on the 1850 census as a Goodman. And then I actually found in Israel in the 1880 census and got a little more definition about his father when he says that his father, because this is the first census where they actually tell us where their parents were born, he doesn't say his father was born in Germany. He says his father was born in Württemberg. When I finally accomplished all this, which took me like 10 years to do, but when it finally all fell into place, I said, oh, that's too simple. That can't work again. So I decided I would try it again on another brick wall and see if it worked again. So slide 56 shows you the methodology again. We're going to look at 1850 census, see if we can find our ancestors' siblings. Slide 57, we're going to use the indexes, and we're going to fill in those blanks to see if we can identify the names of the people who those numbers represent. And slide 58, we're going to confirm our findings using local records. Slide 59 shows you that this is my father's mother, Florence Louise Hill, and my brick wall on this side, again, bottom right-hand corner. What is it about the bottom right-hand corner on my genealogy chart? Thaddeus Pollard Atherton. Now, this is a family where it doesn't matter what record I find for Thaddeus Pollard Atherton, he's always Thaddeus Pollard Atherton. He's not Thaddeus Atherton, he's not Pollard Atherton, he's not Thad Atherton, he's Thaddeus Pollard Atherton. I have all of his children's birth records, all of his children's marriage records, all of his children's death records. I don't have his birth record. I have his death record. I have his marriage record. I have him on all the censuses, Thaddeus Pollard Atherton. And on every one of those except his death record says he was born in Newfane, Vermont. I went out to Newfane, Vermont. It's a very, 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 very small town in Windham County, Vermont. The town clerk was very, very nice. She pulled out everything, which wasn't a whole lot. And we looked and looked and looked. We spent about 3 hours looking through books, old books, and there was never an Atherton recorded in the town of Newfane, Vermont. But on his death record, his children say he was born in Claremont, New Hampshire. I figured that somewhere in that area, because all of those towns, Newfane, Vermont, and Claremont, New Hampshire, are fairly close together. There's just the Connecticut River dividing them. So on slide 60, here's Lorinda Murdoch Atherton's birth record, born 1848 in Franklin, New Hampshire, which is actually in the central part of the state. Father's place of birth, Newfane, Vermont. Slide 61. In my research for Thaddeus Pollard Atherton, frequently, children's names back in the time period we're talking about had relationships to other members of the family. So I figured that Pollard had to come from somewhere. And I found in my local library a Pollard genealogy. It was 2 volumes. It was not indexed. It took me 2.5 years to index it, and the only Atherton I found in the book, there were 2, and slide 61 shows them to you. Captain Thaddeus Pollard, ring any bells? His first daughter, Zilpah, born in 1767, married in 1786, Peter Atherton. He also had a son who married a Phoebe Atherton. Those are the only Athertons in the whole 2 volumes. Slide 62, I told you I love charts and maps and all that kind of stuff, so here I am charting and mapping again. All the towns that I'm checking are in and around Claremont, New Hampshire, and Newfane, Vermont. Slide 63, I went on Ancestry, looked and looked and looked for all the Athertons I could find in New Hampshire and Vermont. Slide 64, slide 65, and slide 66. Yes. We find about 3/4 the way down the page, Levi Atherton, age 62, living in Claremont, New Hampshire, and in his household is a Sophia, a Fanny, and Lorinda M. Atherton. Lorinda is not that common a name. Israel, here I go back to Israel. Thaddeus Pollard named his first daughter Lorinda M. Atherton. Okay, this may be a good starting place. There's also a Frederick in Claremont. Slide 67, here's the actual census in 1850, and they're the first family, family 125. You've got Levi Atherton and Sophia and Fanny and Lorinda M. Maybe his father and his sisters. So I go back to US Gen Web and Roots Web, and I look in the queries for anyone looking for a Levi Atherton, and I find Lori Allen Piper. And Lori has on her website, on her family tree, Levi Atherton with a Sophia when they were born in Claremont, New Hampshire. And the family, including Lorinda, but what's it missing? It's missing a Thaddeus Pollard. When I checked the census for Dan, I found out that he was born about 1817. So there's room in there for Thaddeus, who was born in 1814. He could fit. So I send off an email to Lori Piper, and I say, hi, I think that I may have an ancestor who fits in your family tree. Where did you get this information? And I told her a little bit about Thaddeus, and she wrote back to me, and she said, oh, no, this is from the family Bible. It lists all the children who were born, and your Thaddeus isn't there, so he's not one of my Levi's children. So I write back to her and I said, when was your Bible published, and is it all written in the same handwriting? Well, it turns out her Bible wasn't published until the 1860s. And remember, I said Thaddeus was living in Franklin, New Hampshire, which is in the central part of the state. And on the map, I showed you that Claremont's over by the Connecticut River in the western part of the state. So that makes me wonder if he was estranged from the family, and whoever wrote this Bible didn't realize that there were other children. So that was the assumption I went under. Whether it's true or not, I'm not quite sure. So if I look in 1840, lo and behold, there's Levi Atherton in Claremont, New Hampshire. And again, when I chart it out, slide 70, we see Levi Atherton and all the children that Lori mentioned, along with my Thaddeus. And look, 3 sons, and Thaddeus fits right in there along with Frederick and Dan. I love it when things work out right. And in 1830, you see, the same thing occurs. It fits very nicely. Slide 70. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm hitting a brick wall, I tend to copy everything I find on that surname. Hopefully, someday it will turn out to be useful. And that just happened to be the case in the Athertons. Because when I was having all this trouble, I thought, well, let's look through the Atherton file. It's one of the biggest files I had because I've copied a lot of stuff about Athertons, and none of them proved to be mine except for slide 71. One of the things I copied was a book on Vermont, Warnings Out. Now, there were no Thaddeus's listed. However, there are Levi's listed, and there are Peters listed. Slide 72 shows us Levi Atherton, his wife Sophia, and their children, Sophia and Fanny. Now, this is 1809, and Thaddeus isn't even born until 1814. And where were they warned out of? Newfane, Vermont. On slide 73, we have the warnings out for Brookline. In 1806, we have Peter and Zilpah with their children. Oh, I love it. Levi, Thibault, Charles, Cephas, and Luke. And further down on the page in 1807, Sophia and Peter were warned out again out of Brookline. On slide 74, in 1811, Peter and Zilpah and 2 of the children are warned out of Rockingham, Vermont. Again, all Windham County, all those little towns that cluster around Newfane, Vermont. For those of you who aren't from New England and don't know what a warning out is, in the colonial era and up into the Federalist period, towns were actually responsible for the indigent poor, and later on you get poorhouses. So in order to not have to support these very poor people, towns would warn them out. If they gave them warning, it meant that we're not going to support you. You're on your own. It didn't mean they had to leave town, but it warned them out, saying, winter comes, you can't take care of yourself, the town's not going to help you out. So that's what a warning out is. Slide 75. I couldn't find Levi anywhere on the 1810 census. So I looked at Peter and I thought, okay, let's see. We have some of the surnames for Peter and Zilpah's children. We have some of the names for Levi and their children, and I plot them out, and it doesn't only fit, it's an exact match. So it seems to me that Levi was probably living with his father in 1810. On slide 76, I went over to Claremont, and one of the things I looked at were the death books. And we have Levi Atherton here. He's second up from the bottom. He's age 82 when he died in 1888. 68. No, couldn't be. It's got to be. Anyway, no parents' names, no place of birth. Totally not helpful. On slide 77, here we go again looking at those collateral lines. We find Albert most of the way down the page. He says he was born in Ticonderoga, New York. Well, whoever answered the question, one thing we don't get to fill out is our death record. His father, he says, was born in Harvard, Massachusetts. His mother born in Newfane, Vermont. His father is Levi Atherton. His mother is Sophia Rudder. Slide 78 shows us Fanny Atherton, born Townsend, Vermont, another little town there in Windham County. Father born Harvard, mother born Newfane, father Levi Atherton, mother Sophia Rudder. One of the great things about New Hampshire is, beginning in the 1850s, we have town reports every year, and they publish the births, marriages, and deaths in the town report. So that's makes it very easy to use them. Slide 79, I went back to 1790 in Newfane, Vermont, and I looked to see if there were any Rudder, R-U-D-D or R-U-T-T-E-Rs, in Newfane, Vermont, and lo and behold, there was a Philip Rudder, and there he is. He's one adult, 3 sons, and 6 females in the household. Slide 80, I looked at the microfilmed vital records for Vermont, and I find a Sophia Rudder, born in Newfane, Vermont in 1784. Father Philip, mother not given, always useful. So, what are we going to do? Slide 81. We try to find siblings in 1850 forward that we can match up to our ancestor. We then take those names and use them to identify those numbers in 1790 to 1840. We check out death records, birth records, marriages, probate, taxes, obituaries, church records, whatever we can find to confirm these parents and siblings in these relationships. So using a combination of federal and local records, maybe you can bust down your brick walls like I did here. Thank you very much. Do I have any questions?
Jean, thank you so much. It's an amazing amount of sleuthing that you showed. I have a question for you, and then we'll open it up to the audience. At the beginning, you showed some National Archives charts that had some years and then the census at the top. Do you know where we can access those charts? I thought they were very helpful because you had the person's name written in and then the number of children under the various age groups. Where can we find those charts?
You can't really do this without those. You can print them off for free from Ancestry. And I believe Family Search may also have them available. Used to be able to pick them up at any National Archives location. I don't know if that's still the case.
In that case, thank you, Jean. I might look into that, and I'll add it as a link to your this video. Are there do we have any questions from the audience on site? If you do, I ask that you use the microphones on the sides so that we can pick up your question. It was a very thorough presentation, Jean. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for doing this presentation, and thank you for attending.
At jean.nud@nara.gov if they think of a question later.